the formats and the structure of research reports. So let's begin with the term of report writing or the research report writing. So report writing is a formal style of presenting the research objectives, the facts, the information, and how the researcher could present that data in a very prescribed form. There can be various types of reports. It could be an academic reports, it could be a science reports, business reports, technical reports, and news reports. And in every type of report, the particular researchers follow a different style of presenting their objectives, facts, data, and information. A report can be verbal and written. So a written report is more formal than the verbal report, and the verbal report is more informal in a particular academic context. This is exactly what we denote that a particular researcher has to need to identify the issues, the concern, the particular ideas that they have to put into their research. Then once they get put their ideas into and identify the issues and concern, then the researcher could start to research on that concern, issues, problems, and once they research on such scenarios, and once they identify the exact information, then they organize that information in a very formal style or an informal style. According to the types of reports, it could be academic or news, magazine, verbal, written reports, and accordingly the researcher would work on writing the reports. It could be research report, it could be any other type of report. So the report writing is an art, that how the researcher would communicate the information, how they present that information in a graphical way through which the research can be seen as an investigation process in a formalized manner, and that is exactly called report writing. So symbolically, a particular researcher has to identify, then research, and then organize that information in a very formal style, and then start writing up that information, which includes the objective, facts, conclusions, making recommendation over the findings on which the researcher is actually working on, and that exactly called report writing. Now there are various authors or the universities or the association or institutions who has given the definition of report writing. So report writing is a process of organizing, presenting the information in a very clear, concise, and objective manner for a particular or a specific audience. It also includes gathering all the information, facts, data, which needs to analyze and present in a very formalized manner so that it could be easy or relevant to the topic at the end. And there is another definition which is given by the American Management Association, that report writing is the art of communicating the information, fact, or data that has been attained through research or through any or following any investigation process in a formal, structured manner. It also includes of gathering the information, drawing the conclusion or inferences, or making up the recommendation, which is totally based on the findings, and that is exactly called the report writing, which is given by the American Management Association. Now there are few advantages of report writing. So the first advantage of a written report presents a formal record of a transaction which is possible or which is not possible in a verbal report. A written report you can say convey a very specific message without any distortion or without any particular noise. On the other hand, a message can be easily you can say misrepresented in the verbal report. A written report is more convenient for a lengthy and a distant communication. So wherever you are staying or residing, you can read it easily, the written report in a PDF or any other you can say formats. A written report requires a reader to think before responding to any messages. And through written report, the facts, the figures, the graphs, the statistical data could be easily represented and in a very better format, and the graphics are also being used to represent that information or data in a written report as compared to the verbal report. Now we can come up to the next section, that is the structure of a research report. A typical research report includes an abstract, introduction, literature review, methodology, results, finding, discussion, conclusion, and references and bibliographies, along with the you can say the potential appendices and the supplementary material like the title page or the table of contents, etc. The exact structure, it depends upon on the field of the specific assignments or the university guidelines. Also, it is important to check these requirements on your own. Now we can come up to the structure of a research report. The first one is the preliminary section, where the three main parts has to be included. The first one is the title page. It includes the report title, the author, the academic details. Next one is the table of content. It lists the sections or the subsection of the report with their corresponding page numbers. Abstract, it refers a brief summary of the entire report. It's covering the research problem, methods, objectives, key findings, and conclusions. So this is a preliminary section where these pages has to be covered in a particular report on a front side. Now we can come up to the main body of the research report. The first one is introduction. So while writing an introduction, there are 5 main steps to follow to write up an introduction. The first one is introduction. It provides the background information that which covers the research problem, the objectives, and how the researcher outlines the study scope. The introduction is always portray different aspects depending whether your paper presents the results of the original empirical research or construct an argumentative research with a variety of using the various sources of reviews, and how it includes or present in an introduction section. So there are various steps of 5 steps, so we can come up to one by one. So the first step of writing up the introduction is introduce your topic. So the first job of a researcher or a learner is to introduce that what exactly the researcher or learner is willing to tell to the reader, then what it's your topic and what is exactly interesting or important in your topic. So this is actually attained by a researcher by a strong opening hook. So what is hook? The hook is a striking opening sentence of a which should be clearly defined and relevant to your topic. So before you writing up a strong hook in an introduction part, think of an interesting facts, information, any statistical data, any strong statement, any question, or any brief you can say view that which is relate to your topic, and so that it will get more interesting to read by a reader about your topic. So let's take an example. The following could be effective hook for a research paper about the environment impact of the cattle farming. So the research paper hook could be: the rise of a social media had been accompanied by a sharp increase with the prevalence of the body image issues among the women and girls. So the introduction, the hook that has been used is according to the social media. What the social media has been, you can say, portraying or reflecting relating to this topic, or what the exactly want to share the exact statistical or a strong statement. So this is refers to a strong statement which is related to exactly your topic. So this is how the strong hook could be prepared, and in your introduction, in the opening sentence of your introduction. The next step is to describe the background. So that how you describe your background, how your introduction, it's totally or also depends upon the background, about the reviews that which is related to your topic. So this part of the introduction, it differs depending on what approach your paper is actually following. So in a research paper, you will explore some journal background here, and in a more empirical paper, which is totally based on the previous researches, or you can say references, then it is very important that how to establish that how your topic fits in. Let's take an example of the background and how to write up the background in your introduction. So let's have an example. A recent study which has been conducted by our you can say IVM 2019, that the cattle farmers account for the 2/3 of the agriculture nitrogen emissions in the Netherlands. So this is how the exact author or the organization name along with the respective year that you have to mention in your background, which is needed to reflect in your introduction section or introduction paragraphs. So where the statistics data has also been portrayed in this example of your background, which is relevant to your topic, that what would be the environmental impact of the cattle farming. So this is a background which has been shown or write up in the introduction section. So where the statistical data and what the exact results is actually showing up, which is shown, which is need to be reflect in your background, and that to be included in the introduction section paragraphs. There is also another example that various empirical studies have been conducted into a Facebook usage among the adolescent girls, and again what this statement, the strong statement, has been given by different authors with their respective years, like Tigerman and the Stellar in 2013. It's called a Mater and the Gray in 2014, and what they have conducting the various empirical studies, and what in their studies it shows the exact results about related to the usage of the social media, about the body image issues, and these platforms are actually having a greater influences on the body image issues, where the wrong images has been uploaded on the Instagram or the Facebook, which have a negative impact on the users. So this is how these authors has conducted, and we as a learner or a researcher is including their researches, their conclusions, their results, which is related to our topic, or which should be included in our introduction chapter. Now the third step is establish your research problem. Now this is exactly that you need to work upon. So once your getting an ideas, you are talking about preparing an introduction stage, then preparing the background. The next step is your research problems. What are the areas which is related to your topics, issues or areas of issues which you are willing to address in your report. So research report or paper, it is very important that why it is important to address such issues. What was the reasons behind it, that why you are considering these issues related to your topic. So it is very important in a research paper that you simply state the problem that you are willing to discuss, what is original in your research, what is uniqueness in your research, what arguments will you consider which portray originality in your research related to your issues, or that issues are relevant to your topic. So this is something which need to understand and include the importance of that problems or issues in your introductory stage or section. Like take an example, like while efforts are being made to mitigate these emissions, the policy makers are reluctant to reckon with the scale of the problem. So this is something, a problem is emissions. This is something that how to reduce these emissions. So this is the way that how you write up and include your issues and concern which you need to address in your report. So in a research report, try to lead into a problem, and it should be a basis on your discussions of the literature. So before you write up any research problem, it is very important to go through the research papers, how the authors, different authors has conducted the research papers which is relevant to your topic, and these research questions which needed to focus on how you prepare your answers of these questions which is relevant to your topic in your report. That what research gap is your work intended to fill, what limitations in previous work does it address, what contribution to knowledge does it make. So this is something a particular learner has to think in terms of these questions. Then they can come up a very formalized research problem so that they can address in his report. Step 4 is specify your objectives. So in the introduction chapter, you also need to specify the research objectives, or the main objectives of the study. The research objectives should be clear, specific, and the measurable goals that a particular study is actually dependent on it in order to achieve them through the analyzing or the collection of the data. It always serves as a roadmap for the research study. And this is how the particular researcher has to work on the objectives, and prepare such objectives which can act as a guidance for the readers, which could be measurable through the data collection, through the data analysis, which gives a broader aspects to read for the you can say readers or for any institutions. So let's take an example to understand that how the objective is to be prepared. To understand the factors influencing the customer satisfaction in e-commerce. So there are specific objectives which has been prepared relevant to the research aim, or a main primary aim of the research study. First, to explore the factors influencing the customer satisfaction in e-commerce platform. The second objective, to evaluate the impact of users' reviews on customer satisfaction. Third objective, to describe the key demographics of online consumer who report high satisfaction level. Then the fourth, to explain the relationship between the faster delivery times and increased customer satisfaction. That the objective is to explore, it comes to the exploratory research. Then to evaluate, it comes to the evaluative research. Then to describe any of the key elements, components, demographic factors, we talk about descriptive research. And exploratory research, to explain the relationships between the two main factors. It could be the faster delivery time, or any increased customer satisfaction or decreased customer satisfaction. So this is something we need to prepare, that what topic you have chosen, and based on your topic you have to prepare the main objectives of the study. It could be exploratory, one of the objective could be explorate, one of the objective could be evaluative, one of the objective could be descriptive, one of the objective could be exploratory. So a mixture of all becomes the specific objectives of your study, and that could be measurable, that could be achieved through the data collection and analysis for to come up to a meaningful conclusions and findings. Now we can come up to a hypothesis. So once you specify your objective, the next task is to come to a hypothesis preparation. So what is hypothesis? Hypothesis is a tentative testable explanation in an or in other words we can call an educated guess, where of a particular observed phenomenon, which serving as a tool or serving as a starting point for further investigation or any scientific research. So that is why a hypothesis statement is need to be prepared, so which gives a researcher or a learner to work on a further investigation or do any scientific research which is needed, or a requirement for it. Depends upon the nature of the study. So there are a few examples, the examples of this research hypothesis. If we talk about simple hypothesis, we just make a simple assumption like studying, you can say more can help you do better on tests. So this is a particular relationship between both study time and you can say better test performances. Next one is the directional hypothesis. So here we can talk about conditionals hypothesis. If a person gets 7 hours sleep, then they will feel, you can say, less fatigued than if they sleep less. So this is something a particular you can say relationship which shows about the expected number of you can say hours, and actually the problem that they would face if they less sleep, that is called more fatigue. So this is something directional hypothesis, a direction in a particular statement which shows something direction given to the readers related to the problem and the solution. So if you do, then it would be less problem. If you do less, then it could be a more problem for you. So this is something, a directional hypothesis could be conducted according to the problem and with their respective solution. Next one is a causal hypothesis. We always talk about the relationship, a cause and effect relationship of between the independent variable, that is alcohol use, and dependent variable, that is liver damage. So long-term alcohol use causes a liver damage. So here in this particular statement, a cause and effect relationship shows, which shows also a dependent, but would be an independent variable or dependent variable. So the independent variable is alcohol use and dependent variable is a liver damage. If you take more and more alcohol, then automatically it will cause your liver. So the dependent variable is liver, because liver damage is dependent on the quantity that a particular individual use of alcohol. So this is something, a causal relationship hypothesis, or the causal hypothesis could be prepared according to the need, according to the requirement of the nature of your study. Next one is associational hypothesis. If you think you want to prepare an hypothesis where you want to create a association between any of the variables, association between a demographic variables and the customer experiences, or association between the customer satisfaction and the demographic variables, this is something that you need to associate, a positive association or a negative association between two variables, or between the variables like physical activity levels or the overall health. So this is something you can also create, but it's not necessary that you have to prepare all the types of hypotheses in your study. You can choose any one of them, and accordingly you can prepare your hypothesis, which is totally based on your objectives of the study, right, or specific objectives of the study, so that you can do a further more investigation on your objectives in the form of hypothesis. The next is research questions. So if you are willing to include the research questions in your report, so this is also the one of the aspect which comes under or after you can say research hypothesis. So research question is a question that a particular learner or a researcher want to answer in an empirical research paper. So present your research questions clearly, directly, with a number of discussions at this point. So the rest of the paper will be taken up with the discussion section, and how a researcher could investigate on these questions which totally needs to express clearly. So research question can be framed either directly or indirectly. So the study which is on which the researcher is actually working based on the following questions, like what effects does daily use of Instagram have the prevalence of the body image issues among the excellent girls. So this is a research question which is totally based on the objectives. So the research questions, you don't need to make the out of the box. You need to prepare the research question which is totally related to your objectives, and accordingly the researcher investigate the questions, the answers of those research questions. So in this particular example, the researcher investigate the effects of the daily Instagram use on the prevalence of the body image issues among abstinence girls. So this is how the answer is to be prepared, which is totally based on the research question. And the last step is map out your paper. That means once you have mentioned all these steps in your introduction section or chapter, then the final part is the conclusion of your introduction. It's totally dedicated to the brief overview of the rest of the paper. So in the conclusion, when you write up the conclusion of the introduction, it doesn't mean that what you have written in the introduction section you can conclude. No, what you do in the next chapters, on the chapters that you're going to work on the next stage of your research study, that would be the conclusion of your introduction. So in the paper structured using the structured scientific introduction, methods, results, discussions, you can say is not always necessary. So but if your paper is structured in a you can say a less predictable way, it is important to describe the shape you can see of it for a reader, because whatever you preparing in an introduction, it always a hook for the reader that what you will going to do next after introduction. It could be a literature review, then you have to give your introduction based on your reviews, literature review. Conclusion based of the conclusion of the introduction is based totally on the next stage. It could be a literature review. So if included, the overview should be concise, a short, a direct, or written in a present sense, because what you will do in your next chapter, that you have to include in the conclusion of the introduction. So once you include like literature review, you have included in the conclusion of the introduction, then you will do literature review part chapter. So when you do the literature review, in the conclusion of the literature introduction, what would be the correct conclusion of the introduction? This paper first discusses the several examples of survey-based research into an absolute social media use, and then goes to a into an influences of such you can say body images or a wrong body images that to be placed or uploaded on the different platforms, which could be inferential factor to the different users. So this is how you have to conclude of your introduction. Now the next part, or you can see, of the structure of the research report is the literature review. This is the second chapter of the research report, that is literature review. Now the question arises, what is literature review? It's all about, it is an investigation process, the existing, where the existing knowledge has to be covered up on your topic, providing the relevant reviews, providing the context, and identify the research gaps. So what you are doing in your research and what existing researches is showing. So what would be the gap between your research and the existing research related to your topic? It's not same topic, it's related your topic, and that's called literature review. So literature review is a comprehensive or a critical summary of the published work. It could be article, it could be books, it could be dissertation, it could be research reports on a specific topic, which provides a references, you can say, for a new research. It aims to identify the gaps in existing knowledge. So it is a combination, or it combines the old knowledge and the new knowledge, or convert the old knowledge into a new knowledge. So it also aims to demonstrate the researcher understanding of the field. So there are various types of the literature reviews. It could be the stand-alone review, literature reviews for the research report, dissertation, thesis. This is also the one of the type of the literature review. So let's have a small overview of these types. So standalone articles is also categorized into two main categories, the narrative reviews and the systematic reviews. Now question is narrative review. These are the theoretical discussions of the relevant information on a particular topic and its critical analysis. So in the various countries, even in India as well as in other countries like US, UK, this narrative reviews is always being included in the reviews, because it gives you a brief information along with the critical analysis of that information is to be given, and this is very essential and necessary to give more theoretical knowledge about your topic. So it is also but it is more qualitative in nature rather than quantitative, which always gives a you can say broader aspect theoretically, and that calls a narrative reviews. Systematic reviews is follow a very well planned methodology to a qualitative or a quantitative analysis, which gives you a defined number of studies. So systematic is always follow the systematic procedure designed by a different universities, which gives you a defined number of studies. It's mainly focused on a single questions and have defined a clear objectives that to be worked systematically. So if you have defined any objective and if the objective follows a systematic procedure, then in such studies systematic procedures to be followed and then reaches to a concluded findings, and that's called a systematic reviews. So how to prepare a paragraph for literature review? These are the two main parts. So the first one is synoptic information and the evaluative information, which gives a synopsis, a small synopsis paragraph or information related to the topic. And then once you give a brief, small brief information about the topic, then you give a paragraph about what would be the results of that study, what the author or the existing researcher have evaluated in the study, what would be the findings or results, and what would be the conclusion of that existing research. That need to be included in the literature review. So this is an example that how these two main categories to write up or include into the paragraphs of the reviews, literature review, is synopsis information and the evaluative information. So it's just that what is all about the study. It's a small introduction about the topic, about the research study that study which are related to your topic. So this is something that you need to first introduce, right? Then second one is the, you can say, evaluative study. What the author has evaluated in this study, what would be the statistical data included. So give a main findings, a very essential findings you need to include in the review or in the particular review of a research study. And in this particular study you have to mention the author and name, and of course the year that this study has been conducted by this particular author in this particular year, which is mentioned in this particular literature review paragraphs. It has been mentioned here, the Ping et al., that is 2008. So this is the author which has who has been evaluated the finding, who have been evaluated as meaningful findings or concluded it in a very prescribed manner, and which is included in the evaluative information of a literature review. So this is how a particular learners and the researchers could prepare their literature review, and which is broadly accepted by the international organizations as well. The next stage of the structure of the report is methodology. In other words, we can call it a research methodology. We always talk about providing the details of a research design, the materials, the procedures for the data collection, and what would be the data analysis methods to be used. So these are the three main aspects: the qualitative research, quantitative research, and the mixed methods research. So when we talk about the qualitative, is all about the investigate the human experiences, and it always come up through the more you can say it could be collected through the questionnaires you can say it's mainly used for the data collection and analysis. But quantitative research is more in numbers, which includes the relationships between the variables into more qualitative, where the statistics analysis or the statistical techniques would be more used, would be more quantitative, would be more data which is need to be represented in a research study. So that could be called a quantitative research. The next one is the mixed methods research. Mixed method research is a combination of qualitative research and quantitative. So mostly the learners which having a misconception the study could be more quantitative or more qualitative. If it could be, the studies could also be conducted if we use the combination of both qualitative and quantitative. Some objectives will be you can see analyzed using the quantitative research, and some objectives could be analyzed using the qualitative. So in this way the research methodology has to be decided by the researcher or a learner, that which type of research methodology could be used in their researches, and accordingly the learner or a researcher could adopt any of the type, whether it could be mixed or more qualitative or more quantitative, and accordingly based on the types or based on the approaches, they have to mention the research design, the materials to be used, what would be the procedure, what would be the data analysis method, what would be the ethical consideration, how the pilot study could be conducted, how the researcher could do the reliability and validity of the data, what could be the limitations of the methodology, what could be the sampling design procedures, what would be the sample size. So everything has to be mentioned in the research methodology, which is a very essential part of the overall report, because based on this methodology the next of the chapter could be worked on. So this is something where the researcher has to focus more carefully. Example of the research methodology: imagine a researcher studying the impact of social media on the self-esteem of teenagers. Research questions you can prepare, if any of the research question, if you're willing to. Methodology, it would be approach, it could be a mixed method approach to be followed. Data collection questionnaire, a survey to be used, a sample of 500 teenagers are distributed through including the questions, through the social media usage frequency, and of course validate the self-esteem scales. So this is something how the data is to be collected through questionnaires. So and through survey through the use of the questionnaires method. The qualitative is talk about the follow-up interviews are conducted up to you can say 20 customers or 20 respondents, and through the survey, and the samples should be originally collected and explore their personal you can say experiences and the perceptions towards the use of the social media, and whether it would worth for their self image or not. This is something that how the research methodology has to be prepared. Next is data analysis. This is more quantitative, because statistical data is to be performed using the survey data, and it, of course when we talk using of the statistical tools or statistical techniques, that means more quantitative rather than qualitative. Qualitative is all about that interview transcript which need to be analyzed to fulfill the research objectives of the study or the main objectives of the study, which common theme of the study, patterns, specific examples you can include, a specific views you can include of the customers, that how the social media impacts self-esteem. So this is something where the more theoretical aspect you can also include, which could be where the research objectives could be achieved. key elements of the research methodology, it could be first is research design. You have to mention sampling, that what sort of sampling, including the sample size, the characteristics of the participants, data collection, what would be the tools and procedure, what could be the methods of data collection could be used. It could be through interviews, it could be through questionnaires, it could be observation, through the cases, case studies, etc. The next one is data analysis method. It's all about the specific statistical techniques, either qualitative or quantitative, in order to analyze the collected data and draw the conclusions. So this is the key elements which need to be included in your research report. Next is ethical consideration. The researcher must address the ethical standards of their study. And why? Because ethical, because in order to ensure that their information or their data could be kept confidential and responsible. We are responsible to handle your data. Next is study aims and objectives. You should clearly define the research questions, any goals which are essential to include in your research methodology. Reporting plan, a strategy that how the research findings will be presented and communicated is also key aspect of the methodology, that how many weeks, how many months it will take to complete or to finish the different chapters of your research report. And the next fourth stage is the research results and findings. So it should present the collected data, often using tables, figures and graphs without any interpretations. So the factual is the data, the results section state what was found or what is mean and why it is important for us. Objectives, researchers should avoid meeting their personal opinion, views or personal interpretation should be avoided in this particular section. Systematic, whatever the information is available or researched is presented in a logical order, make it as easy for the reader to follow. Next is foundation. The results provides the basis for the subsequent discussion section where the interpretation and significance are explored. So it is because discussion is totally based on the results. So if the results are to be clearly written, then of course this discussion could be clearly mentioned and defined based on the findings, based on the results. Example. We can take up an example for that. Imagine a behavioral study investigating the impact of customer report on purchasing behavior. So the study is automatic. The researcher observes interaction, the interaction between the service executive and the customers, measuring the rapport building and the subsequent purchases. Now, how to write up the results and findings? The results section would present the data. Participants who engaged in rapport building behavior with service executive made purchases 72% of the time, while those in the control group who did not build rapport or relations made purchases only 38% of the time. This is called a result. If you have an objective and based on the objective you have collected the data, then you have to represent the data into the tables, graphs, and then you have to mention, and then you have to interpret it into your results section. So this is how you could easily prepare the collected data, turn into the tables, and then write up the findings or the results. And the next is discussion. So analyze and interpret the results, and after that you need to explain their significance and relate to the existing research and theories. That whatever the results has been come up in for your study. Now then in the discussion section, how you relate to the relevant or existing researches and theories, that comes under the discussion sectors. section. In research, the discussion section analyze and interpret your study findings and explain their significance and retain them to the previous researchers. Key components of the research discussion: summarize the key findings. Of course, when a researcher briefly reiterate the most important results only. Interpret the findings, explain what your results mean in plain language and focusing on their importance. Compare. Then once you interpret the findings, you need to compare that findings with the existing researchers, which is a very important task in the discussion section. Then once you compare, then you need to discuss the implication, that explain the broader implication of your findings, their potential benefits, and how they contribute to the field. So this is something, the discussion, these are the components which need to be included in the discussion section. Knowledge limitation. If after discussing any limitations found for your studying in case of the sample size, methodology, or reliance of self-reported data, you need to acknowledge that limitations in your research report. So then the next is suggest future research or any scope for the future study. It is important to recommend future studies or steps that could be taken to build on your findings and address limitations. Then answers research questions. Connect your findings back to the original research question posted in your introduction. This is very important, that once you conduct a research question, it is also equally important to answer that research questions as well in a particular paragraphs. Now there are various steps for writing a good research paper discussion section. So the first one is summarize the findings, interpret the results, compare with the literature, then discuss the implications, the theoretical and the practical implication, then limitation, then of course propose the future research in it. This is an example of the research discussion, that our study found a significant positive correlation between the regular exercise of the improved mental health supporting the previous researches. So this is how this result related to the previous researches. That also highlights the pre-physical activity role in well-being. However, the study limitation to a single location and dependent on the self-reported measure means these findings are not fully generalizable and may be influenced by the recall basis. This is how your result, your finding is relating to the previous researches and what would be their results, and then conclude the results of both your findings and previous researches. So the future researchers should you can say recruit more diverse samples from the various locations and explore objective measures of both exercise and the mental health to understand the underlying mechanism more deeply and inform targeted intervention. It means now after comparing or the previous and your results, now you are putting up the future scope for the future study, that this has to be done, need to and should recruit more diverse samples so that the underlying objectives could be achieved more clearly. So this is something, a discussion on your findings relate to the previous research and what would be the scope for the future study, and then come to the conclusion. This is how to write up the research discussion of your research report. And the last is conclusion. Like it conclusions chapter that it summarizes the key findings, the study objective, the suggest the implication and the areas of the future research. And this is how the difference between the discussion and conclusion. So conclusion is all about that what would be the key findings, how you relate the study objectives in the conclusion, and accordingly you can include the implication, the theoretical and the practical implication, and what would be the area, the scope for the future research, and the readers could follow that scope, follow that areas in their future researches as well, so that the topic would be more explored, would be more you can say critical to for further investigations. Example of the conclusion is mentioned, the research questions you have is mentioned, then the study found that the students who have interactive learning apps. So this is how the conclusion is to be drawn, it has been write up, it's to be statistically significant, and this is based on the research question. So if you prepare any research question, this is how the conclusion of the question, of the conclusion of the study turn into an answer of a research question. So this is how you can include the main finding relate to the research question. Then you can come up a major recommendation, so that this issue, if any issues exist, it could be resolved through the recommendation given by the researcher or the learner. These are the supplementary sections. It refers the references or the bibliographies and appendices. When we come up to the references and bibliography, a properly formatted list of all the sources should be cited in your report. Appendices should contain the supplementary material like detailed data, questionnaire form or other supporting documents. So references should be APA style, it should be MLA style, or it could be any Chicago or Harvard you can say a bibliography referring style. A bibliography lists sources alphabetically by author last name using a specific pronunciation and formatting convention of each source, that you have to mention the source also in the bibliographies. It could be through journals, books or any web pages. So this is how the bibliography has to be written up. The authors, the last name of the author and the first name, then of course the author role it could be, then the title of the article, then of course the place of publication, then publisher, then date of the publication, then total number of the pages, and then note how many citations has been you can say found. So this is something a bibliography format has to be prepared and include in your research study. So this is an example of the API formatting or referring styles, where the last name of the author, then year, then the name of the article or a name of the any book, then the publisher name, then author name, then we can publisher name, then any volume or issue number, then the pages number. So this is how we can use the APA referencing style. This is also a MLA word citing example. So this is also the similar to the APA but not the same. And the next one is appendix. So in research, an appendix is a section which always put up at the end of the document containing the supplementary materials, and it could be a detailed data, a detailed questionnaires, and of course any other document which is relevant to your paper or a study. Appendix can include the items like raw data, extensive tables and figures, questionnaires, interview interview transcript, detailed experimental procedure, or any statistical analysis. So this is something that a particular learner or researcher can put at the end of your report into these if any aspect has been needed to attach with your report. So what to be include? It's raw data, survey instrument, interviews transcript, detailed tables and figures, experimental procedure, any calculation, any statistical analysis, outcome you can also attach, or any relevant communication which is equivalent for your study. How to format? First is place the data, then numbering the titles, then again referring that you can see appendix like A, B, C, D, alphabetical or the numerical. Then of course group the organizational names, that whatever the organization you have used, you have to provide the type of the data at the supplementary material, any consistency, any format including headings, font, caption style has to be followed, and digital options are also available to get the data and how to attach that supplementary data with your study. And this is an importance of the research and report, that it advancing knowledge, it's innovation and development, it problem solving, it evidence based decision making, it validate the existing knowledge, and also a social and economic impact, continuous learning and improvement, personal and profession, of course growth, and the last one is preservation of the cultural heritage. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening this lecture. I will come up to a more and more interesting, relevant and important topics. So till time, thank you and namaste to all.